The invisible law of emotional gravity. You must understand this. A woman does not cling to a man because of his charm, his words, or even his kindness. She clings to what awakens the part of her that was asleep. The moment a man touches that silent place, the one buried beneath her independence, her strength, her carefully built defenses, something ancient stirs inside her. It's not attraction, it's recognition. Carl Jung once wrote, "We do not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." And nowhere is that truer than in love, because real attachment doesn't come from flattery or effort. It comes from impact, from the subtle psychological gravity that pulls two souls toward each other, even when logic says they should walk away. It's not the words that make her remember you. It's the energy that lingers when you say nothing. Jung called it the meeting of two unconscious minds. He believed that every relationship is a dialogue between the visible self and the hidden self, the persona and the shadow, the anima and the animus. When these forces collide, something powerful happens. Her conscious mind may resist you, but her deeper layers, the ones ruled by instinct, memory, and the collective unconscious, begin to respond. You see, a woman doesn't bond through logic. She bonds through resonance, through the way your presence rearranges the emotional atmosphere around her, through the moments she can't explain but can't forget either. In human psychology, this is called emotional imprinting. In Jungian philosophy, it's known as archetypal activation. When your energy awakens an inner pattern in her psyche that had been dormant for years. She doesn't cling to you as a person. She clings to the transformation you symbolize within her. And that is why so many men fail to understand attachment. They chase the woman instead of becoming the mirror that makes her see herself more clearly. So tonight, let us go deeper, beyond dating, beyond tactics, beyond surface attraction, into the Jungian anatomy of emotional connection. These are not tricks to make her love you. They are 8 archetypal actions, subtle energies that awaken something sacred, something unforgettable in the feminine psyche. When you understand them, you will stop chasing attention, because you will realize that attention is gravity, and gravity doesn't chase, it simply pulls. Now, let's begin. Action I. Break her predictability without breaking her safety. You must never forget this. A woman's psyche does not fall for chaos. It falls for contrast, for the man who feels like both earth and storm. In Carl Jung psychology, this paradox lies at the heart of what he called the animus and the anima, the eternal dance between the masculine and feminine principles within the human soul. She is drawn not to your logic, but to the way your energy disrupts her emotional rhythm without destroying her ground. In human psychology, we know the mind seeks patterns, but the heart seeks interruption. It wants the familiar, shattered by something real. It wants the comfort of safety, wrapped in the thrill of uncertainty. Too predictable, and you become invisible. Too chaotic, and she retreats behind her walls. But between the two, between certainty and mystery, something extraordinary happens. Her unconscious awakens. That's where attachment begins, not in words, but in tension. In that small psychological gap where she can't fully read you, yet feels she doesn't need to. It's the same mechanism Jung described in his Red Book. When the soul meets what it cannot understand, it projects meaning onto it. And so she begins to dream about you, to analyze you, to feel you in the space between her thoughts. You haven't seduced her. You've simply become a symbol in her psyche, an archetype she cannot decode. Her curiosity becomes devotion because her mind needs to close the loop you've opened. But here lies the art. You must disrupt her emotional predictability without ever disturbing her sense of safety. That is masculine mastery, the ability to stir chaos while radiating peace. You see, Carl Gustav Jung taught that the true masculine energy is not a dominance. It is sovereignty, the inner law that governs itself, the calm that survives its own storm. When your actions come from conviction, not need, not manipulation, she feels it. She feels that your rhythm is your own, that you are not reacting to her, but moving from your center. And in that moment, something ancient happens inside her. Her nervous system relaxes, even as her heart begins to race. Because you've created the rarest experience, safe unpredictability, you become the paradox her biology can't resolve, the mystery that feels secure, the danger that feels kind, the unknown that feels like home. She won't know why her mind replays your silences, why the calm in your voice feels heavier than noise, why your absence hums like a question she can't stop answering. But her unconscious knows it has found something it cannot control, and therefore cannot forget. You're not playing games. You're mastering rhythm. You're teaching her nervous system that love doesn't live in constant comfort. It lives in motion. And every time you act from truth, instead of approval, you strengthen the polarity between her yearning and your peace. She begins to orbit your stillness, not because she wants to win you, but because your presence interrupts the loop she's lived in her whole life, the loop of chasing validation, of trying to be enough. In your unpredictability, she finds something sacred, the echo of her own freedom. That is how you break her predictability without breaking her safety. You stop trying to please her emotions and start speaking to her unconscious. You stop being one more man in her story and become the mirror that makes her story change direction. Action 2. Create experiences that her body remembers. A woman doesn't remember you with her mind. She remembers you with her nervous system. Her body is a living archive, a temple of emotional memory. Every glance, every tone, every silence you leave behind becomes an imprint beneath her skin. That is why in Carl Jung psychology, the body is never just physical. It is the shadow of the soul, the visible shape of the invisible. Words fade, promises evaporate, but the body keeps a score. It remembers who made it tense, who made it tremble, and who made it feel safe enough to exhale. You see, in human psychology, attachment is not formed through logic. It is formed through somatic repetition. The subconscious mind connects emotion to sensation. So every breath you take beside her becomes a quiet ritual of conditioning. If she feels peace when you're near, her body begins to associate your presence with home. If she feels chaos, it will associate you with danger. But the man who understands inner balance knows how to awaken both, gently. He doesn't rush. He doesn't flood her senses. He conducts them, like a composer, aware of every note in the symphony of her nervous system. Your tone of voice, low, steady, deliberate, becomes a signal of safety. Your silence, full, not empty, becomes a field of presence. Your movement, slow, conscious, becomes a mirror of control. In Carl Gustav Jung's philosophy, the feminine doesn't fall for what excites her. She falls for what regulates her. Her body opens not to pleasure first, but to peace. And only then does pleasure become holy. This is why your stillness matters more than your words, because your energy teaches her body something the world rarely gives her, that she can relax and still be desired. When you master that, you stop chasing validations. You begin reprogramming her memory. Her breathing synchronizes with yours without either of you noticing. Her pulse slows when you enter the room, and later, when you're gone, her body searches for that rhythm, that quiet frequency where her chaos finally felt understood. That's when she realizes it's not you she misses. It's the state she entered when you were near. In Jungian terms, this is archetypal resonance, the masculine becoming a vessel through which the feminine rediscovers her own safety. The man becomes the self, the unshakable center that allows the other to unfold. He doesn't seduce, he stabilizes. He doesn't overwhelm, he grounds. And that grounding becomes magnetic because her psyche has been taught to associate love with anxiety, the endless waiting, the overthinking, the performance. But you bring her something different, the paradox of intensity without urgency, the kind of calm that shakes her to the core. And the deeper truth is this: you are not training her to depend on you. You are teaching her body what healthy energy feels like. That is the most unforgettable sensation there is. Even after separation, her nervous system will recall it. She'll enter a crowded room and feel a sudden stillness, and for a split second, it will feel like you're there. Because the body never forgets what made it feel both safe and alive. In the language of Carl Jung's Red Book, that is the sacred alchemy of presence, to awaken the instinct and the spirit at once, to remind her that eros, true connection, is not lust dressed as chaos, but consciousness dressed as touch. So, do not rush to impress her mind. Speak to her deeper memory, the one that lives below thought, beneath story, beneath time. Create experiences that her body remembers, and you will no longer need to chase her attention, because her very cells will carry your name, not as a word, but as a frequency. Action 3. Master the rhythm of presence and absence. Love dies not from distance, but from predictability. In Carl Jung psychology, every living psyche moves through rhythms: expansion and contraction, connection and withdrawal, eros and logos. Even the soul breathes, and every woman, consciously or not, feels that rhythm within her. It is the pulse of the collective unconscious, the dance between closeness and mystery that defines human desire. When a man understands this law, he no longer fears silence. He no longer fills every space with words or gestures. He learns the alchemy of intermittence, appearing and retreating with intention, like the tide that kisses the shore and then withdraws to let her breathe. Too much presence, and you become routine. Too much absence, and you become a ghost. But between the two, there is longing, and longing is the birthplace of love. Psychology calls this variable reinforcement, the same principle that makes the heart crave what it cannot predict. But Jung went deeper. He saw in this rhythm a reflection of the archetypal balance between the lover and the warrior, the part of a man that reaches and the part that retreats into stillness to to preserve his strength. A woman bonds most deeply when she feels both, when your presence nourishes her and your absence reminds her of your gravity, because every time you return after space, you reawaken the chemistry of anticipation, not by manipulation, but by the simple rhythm of authenticity. You are not disappearing to provoke her. You are returning to your center to remember yourself. And that, she feels. She can sense when your silence is punishment and when it's peace. She can tell when your distance comes from fear and when it comes from purpose. The masculine rhythm she trusts is not random. It is grounded, sacred, deliberate. It moves like breath. In, out, hold, release. When your life is full, when your mission is alive, your absence ceases to feel like rejection. It feels like devotion to something higher. And paradoxically, that is what makes your presence irresistible. Because she can feel that you are not orbiting her, you are orbiting meaning. And when a woman senses that, she doesn't chase you out of insecurity, she follows you out of reverence. Carl Jung wrote, "The meeting of two personalities is like the contact of two chemical substances. If there is any reaction, both are transformed. Transformation requires space. No chemical can burn forever without rest. No soul can stay open without retreat. When you withdraw, you're not leaving her. You are allowing polarity to breathe. You are teaching her that connection is not about constant nearness. It is about energetic coherence. Your rhythm, steady, sovereign, alive, becomes the new metronome of her emotional world. She begins to feel your presence, even in your silence, to anticipate your return, not as relief, but as renewal. That is how addiction turns into devotion, not because she's afraid to lose you, but because her psyche has learned your pattern, the sacred dance between presence and absence. And in that rhythm, you stop being just a man in her life. You become her psychological climate. The atmosphere her heart now breathes in. Action 4. Let her express herself without judgment. Most men listen to respond, but the rarest kind of man, the one a woman's soul never forgets, listens to witness. In Carl Jung psychology, this is called holding the tension of the opposites, the sacred art of remaining still, while another reveals her storm. You don't rush to fix her. You don't rush to save her. You simply stay. And in that stillness, she begins to heal. Because every woman, no matter how strong, carries a quiet exhaustion, the weight of being misunderstood. She has spent years performing versions of herself: the nurturer, the achiever, the caretaker, the mystery. And beneath them all, her true voice waits, trembling, patient, unseen. When she finally meets a man who can hold space without judgment, her body recognizes something ancient. I am safe here. Her nervous system exhales before her mind understands why. She doesn't feel studied or corrected. She feels witnessed. That's the power of presence. The kind Carl Jung called the self. The calm center that does not react, does not collapse, and does not need to prove understanding. You become a mirror, not of her mask, but of her essence. Human psychology teaches us that the deepest healing doesn't happen through advice, but through attunement, through the steady rhythm of someone who can feel another's pain without drowning in it. And that is what you offer her, a safe container where chaos can breathe. When she speaks, do not reach for solutions. Let silence do what words cannot. Silence tells her, you are not too much. Silence tells her, your feelings are allowed to exist. And as she unfolds, her psyche begins to associate your presence with freedom. Because the rarest thing a woman experiences is not passion, it's permission. Permission to be unmasked and still be loved. In Jungian archetypes, this moment is sacred. You are not the lover chasing pleasure. You become the healer archetype, the sacred masculine that helps the feminine integrate her wounded parts. When you remain grounded as she cries, trembles, or reveals her fears, you are showing her that love can hold pain without fear. And she will never forget that, because no amount of attraction compares to the memory of being seen without shrinking. She will replay the moment, the way your gaze didn't flinch, the way your energy didn't pull away. And in her subconscious, a sentence forms, I can exist here and still be worthy. That is emotional safety. That is the new addiction. Desire fades when it's satisfied. But emotional freedom, that becomes devotion. Even if she walks away, she will carry you inside her, because you were not the man who tried to fix her. You were the man who allowed her to be. And that feeling, the quiet relief of not needing to perform, is what every feminine soul longs for. It is inner healing disguised as love. So remember, you do not create attachment by chasing her emotions. You create it by offering a space large enough for them to exist. You do not win her trust by being perfect. You earn it by being still when she is not. Be her mirror, not her master. Let her see herself through the calm of your gaze, because in that reflection, she will finally see the woman she has always been, and she will associate that revelation with you. That is how a woman begins to cling, not from need, but from recognition, not to your body, but to the safety of her own soul, the one she found in your silence. Action 5. Show interest without dependence. There is a fine line between love and need, between interest that awakens devotion and dependence that kills it. A woman can feel that line long before you cross it, because energy never lies. When your attention comes from fullness, it feels like sunlight, but when it comes from emptiness, it burns like hunger. In Carl Jung psychology, every relationship mirrors the state of the self. The dependent man does not love. He seeks to be completed. He projects his unhealed anima, the inner feminine he has not integrated, onto the woman before him. And when she withdraws, he feels abandoned by his own soul. But the man who has met his inner feminine, who has walked through loneliness, shadow, and longing, no longer seeks a mother in disguise. He offers presence, not pursuit, choice, not craving. You see, in human psychology, dependence is not love. It is self-forgetfulness. When you orbit someone else's approval, you lose your gravity. You stop being a man and become an echo. But when you stand rooted in your own life, your attention becomes a gift instead of a request. A rare, deliberate gesture that says, I see you, but I also see myself. That's what creates magnetism. Because women do not crave possession. They crave admiration from someone free. The moment she feels you could have anyone, but choose her with clarity and restraint, her body enters a paradox she cannot resolve. Her logic says, he doesn't need me. But her heart whispers, then why do I feel chosen? That contradiction is the birthplace of fascination. Carl Gustav Jung wrote that wholeness is not achieved by eliminating opposites, but by holding them. And that's exactly what you do. You hold both affection and detachment in perfect tension. You can care deeply without collapsing. You can give without losing yourself in the giving. That energy, quiet, steady, sovereign, awakens a deeper archetype in her psyche, the queen. Because only a woman who feels safe beside power that doesn't consume her can rise into her own. When you no longer depend on her for validation, you become the mirror of her own independence, and she feels it in the way your eyes hold calm even when she tests your patience, in the way your voice stays measured even when she pulls away. You do not shrink when she withdraws, because your peace was never borrowed from her presence. That's what makes your energy unforgettable. Interest is warmth. Dependence is weight. The first invites her closer. The second makes her run. So keep your center intact. Let your purpose remain your axis. Show her that love doesn't have to mean losing direction, because every time you stand firm in your calm, you are teaching her nervous system that safety does not equal submission. That connection can breathe inside freedom. In the Jungian path of individuation, two whole beings do not merge to escape loneliness. They meet to expand consciousness. The masculine offers direction. The feminine offers depth. And together, they evolve. That's why when your life is full, when your mission, your silence, your solitude all carry meaning, you stop seeking nourishment from her. You become nourishment to her. She begins to crave your restraint, because your boundaries make her feel that your love is a choice, not a transaction. And that kind of love, grounded yet mysterious, awakens her devotion more than any promise ever could. So remember this truth. When you no longer need her to complete you, she will feel compelled to join you. When you no longer beg for her attention, she will fight for your presence, because value in the feminine psyche is measured not by what you hold on to, but by what you can let go of without losing your peace. Show interest, yes. Be human, yes. But let your affection carry the scent of sovereignty, because when your heart is open, but your soul remains centered, you stop being a man who wants her and become a man her unconscious cannot replace. Action 6. Leave an imprint in her unconscious. In the end, what binds a woman to you is not what you do while you are there, but what remains when you are gone, because every soul leaves a signature, not on the body, not on the mind, but on the unconscious, the place Jung called the vast ocean beneath the ego. And when your energy has touched that depth, she can no longer tell where you end and where memory begins. You cease to be a person. You become a frequency. In Carl Jung psychology, the unconscious is not darkness. It's the archive of the soul. It records the sensations, symbols, and silences that shaped her without words. And if your presence carried truth, if your calm became the mirror where she saw herself, then a trace of you is written there, quietly, in the language of energy. You see, her body forgets logic, her mind forgets promises, but her unconscious remembers how she felt in your presence. It remembers the weight of your silence, the way your eyes didn't demand but invited, the way your stillness made her chaos settle, not through control, but through containment. This is psychological resonance. the point where your energy synchronizes with her deeper layers. It's not manipulation, it's memory, cellular, spiritual, ancient. In human psychology, we call this imprinting. In Carl Gustav Jung's philosophy, it is archetypal transmission. When two souls exchange symbols, not sentences, you awaken something in her that was waiting to be seen. And now, every time the world touches that part of her again, it will whisper your name. Maybe it will happen in small moments, a scent she can't trace, tone that feels too familiar, a silence that reminds her of you. Her conscious mind will move on, but her unconscious will replay the same pattern, the same calm, the same pulse, the same safety and danger intertwined. Because you didn't give her a story to remember, you gave her a state of being, and the soul always longs to return to the state that made it feel whole. That is why she comes back, not out of loyalty, but out of gravity, because you've touched something beyond preference. You've touched archetype. Every woman carries within her the lover, the mother, the mystic, the child. When your energy mirrors one of these, you awaken her mythology. You become not just a man, but a symbol, a bridge between her conscious life and her forgotten depths. In the Red Book, Jung wrote, "Every relationship is a dialogue between two souls and their shadows. And if your shadow was honest, if it met hers without fear, then even when you leave, your echo remains in her unconscious as a teacher. Because here's the secret. You cannot truly leave peace in her if you live in turmoil within yourself. You cannot awaken her mystery if you are still afraid of your own. The imprint you leave is not built from performance. It is built from your level of integration. How much of your own shadow you've made peace with. The more whole you are, the safer she feels in your absence. That's the paradox of real power. You disappear, but your stillness remains. Your memory doesn't demand attention. It simply hums beneath her thoughts, like a vibration she can't unhear. When her world gets loud, she'll remember the quiet you carried. When she meets men who try too hard, she'll feel the difference, the absence of depth, the noise where silence used to live. And in that moment, you'll return to her, not as a person, but as a mirror of her own transformation. That is what Jung meant by the union of opposites, the moment when one soul becomes the catalyst for another's growth. You did not control her, you did not own her, you altered her, the way light alters shadow, the way truth alters illusion. And that is why your memory lives longer than your touch, because you became not just her experience, but her awakening. So remember, the goal is not to be unforgettable through effort, but through alignment, through the energy of a man who has made peace with himself. Because what the unconscious craves most is the feeling of wholeness. And when she felt that with you, you became the sound her psyche keeps returning to long after the song has ended. Action 7. Awaken her archetype of devotion. Every woman carries within her a secret temple, not made of stone or prayer, but of energy. It is the temple of devotion, where the feminine meets what she perceives as worthy. In Carl Jung's psychology, every woman holds within her a constellation of archetypes: the lover, the mother, the queen, the mystic. These are not roles she plays. They are energies that live beneath her consciousness, waiting for something to awaken them. When a man moves from his higher center, from purpose, presence, and inner order, he becomes a mirror for those archetypes. He doesn't demand her submission, he evokes her devotion, because devotion is not weakness. It is the feminine expression of reverence. It is what happens when a woman's soul recognizes something sacred in the masculine before her. You cannot force that moment. You can only embody it. When your words are few, but your integrity is constant. When your actions carry weight, but not performance. When your stillness feels like direction, not distance. Her unconscious registers. This energy is safe to trust. That is the seed of devotion. In human psychology, attraction begins in curiosity. But in Jungian psychology, devotion begins in recognition. The recognition of a man who has met his own shadow and returned whole. Because only a man who has integrated his darkness can be trusted with a woman's light. The man who hasn't will worship her, fear her, or try to control her. But the integrated man, he simply sees her. He does not demand her to kneel. His groundedness invites her soul to rise. Jung once wrote, "The meeting of two personalities is like the contact of two chemical substances. If there is any reaction, both are transformed." That transformation, that sacred combustion, is what devotion truly is. It's not about her obedience. It's about mutual elevation. She becomes the portal. You become the pillar. Together, you build something the world rarely witnesses, the alchemy of Eros and Logos. Eros, the divine feminine, expands. Logos, the awakened masculine, gives shape. And from that union emerges not attachment, but transcendence. In the feminine psyche, devotion is not directed toward the man himself, but toward what she experiences through him. Through his steadiness, she remembers her own depth. Through his purpose, she remembers her own divinity. Through his restraint, she remembers her own power. That is why she clings, not to your ego, but to the energy that reminds her who she truly is. You have become a mirror of her inner kingdom. The archetype of the king is not about dominance. It is about order, vision, and benevolent strength. When you stand in that energy, she becomes the queen without effort. And in that recognition, her heart bows, not to you, but to the part of herself that awakens in your presence. This is devotion, not as worship of a man, but as union with meaning itself. When she senses that your actions come from inner law, not from desire for control, not from fear of loss, you become what Jung called the self in masculine form, the axis around which her chaos finds its rhythm. She will not say it aloud, but inside, her soul whispers, "He does not take my freedom. He reminds me why I deserve to be free." That is the highest form of love. When one energy awakens another into sovereignty, and once that happens, you no longer hold her attention through intensity. You hold it through integrity. You no longer have to be unpredictable or mysterious, because the greatest mystery is now within her, the part of her that came alive when she met your truth. You didn't teach her devotion. You evoked it, not through dominance, but through depth, not through control, but through consciousness. And that kind of imprint, soul to soul, is what the ancient mystics called the marriage of energies. So remember this. She will not cling because she is weak. She will cling because her soul has remembered something holy, and your energy was the spark. Action 8. Become her mirror of transformation. Every true connection carries a secret purpose. not to complete us, but to reveal us. Carl Jung once said, "The meeting of two souls is like the collision of two chemical substances. If there is any reaction, both are transformed." But he also warned, transformation is never painless, because the people who awaken us the most are rarely the ones who make us comfortable. They are the ones who disturb the sleep of our unconscious. When a woman meets a man who is truly conscious, who doesn't reflect her image, but her potential, her psyche begins to rearrange itself around him, not because of manipulation, but because he mirrors what her soul has been seeking to become. You see, in Carl Jung psychology, every relationship is a laboratory of individuation. The unconscious doesn't choose partners for pleasure. It chooses them for integration, to meet the parts of ourselves we've avoided, to face our shadow through another's eyes. And when she looks into yours, something ancient stirs. The reflection is too clear to ignore. Her light and her shadow both appear. The parts she hides, the parts she denies. Suddenly they have nowhere to run. If you remain centered, if you can hold her beauty and her chaos, without judgment, she will begin to see herself more completely. That is transformation. Not because you taught her, but because your presence made truth unavoidable. That is what it means to become her mirror. In human psychology, projection is the first step to self-awareness. We project our disowned qualities onto those we love, our suppressed tenderness, our hidden rage, our forgotten innocence. The man who understands this doesn't react when she projects. He reflects. He doesn't absorb her pain. He simply shows her its shape. Through you, she begins to meet herself, her strength, her jealousy, her longing, her divine capacity for love. And that process, though uncomfortable, is sacred, because without reflection, there is no recognition. And without recognition, there is no growth. In Carl Gustav Jung's Red Book, he described love as the bridge through which the soul meets itself in another. That bridge is not built from words, but from awareness. So you must understand, the highest form of attraction is not desire, but transformation. You are not meant to be her destination. You are meant to be her mirror. When you embody truth, she will confront her illusions. When you remain calm, she will meet her own storms. When you choose integrity over approval, she will awaken to her own self-betrayal. And in that tension, that sacred discomfort, she begins to evolve. This is not the love story the world teaches. It is the inner alchemy Jung spoke of, where masculine presence and feminine intuition burn away everything that isn't real. You are the fire that clarifies, not the cage that confines. And if you can hold that fire with compassion, you will leave something in her that no other man ever could, the memory of who she became when she met you. Because she will outgrow her need for you, but she will never outgrow what you awakened in her. You will become a symbol in her myth, the chapter where she finally faced herself. That is what it means to love without possession, to give presence instead of control, to awaken devotion without demanding loyalty. When you reach that point, you are no longer just a man in her story. You are the mirror her soul used to find its reflection. And through that reflection, both of you evolve. Because the truth is, you were never her transformation. You were simply the moment her transformation recognized itself through you. And that is where human love touches the divine, not when two people fuse, but when two souls become mirrors that set each other free. The alchemy of presence. In the end, this was never about attraction. It was about awakening, because desire is only the spark, but what truly binds two souls is what that spark reveals. Jung said, "The meeting of two personalities is like the contact of two chemical substances. If there is any reaction, both are transformed. And this is that reaction. From desire, you learned how to feel. From awakening, you learned what feeling costs. From devotion, you learned what it means to see the sacred in another. And through transcendence, you realized that love was never meant to possess. It was meant to illuminate. Every woman you meet, every man you become, is part of this alchemical cycle. Light meets shadow, masculine meets feminine, ego meets soul. And in that collision, something ancient remembers its wholeness, because Carl Jung psychology was never about the mind alone. It was about the soul's return to balance. Through the feminine, the masculine learns softness. Through the masculine, the feminine learns stillness. And when both energies meet in truth, they no longer chase, they recognize. Recognition. That's the secret. It is what every heart longs for beneath the chaos of romance. Not to be completed, but to be mirrored. When she looked at you and felt seen without performing, that was not your power. That was her awakening. When you stood still as she unraveled, you weren't controlling her emotion. You were grounding her into her own. And in that space, between chaos and calm, the miracle happened. She met herself. That is the true alchemy of presence. You did not conquer her. You clarified her. You did not make her depend on you. You reminded her of the wholeness she had forgotten. And as she transforms, so do you. Because you're not immune to your own medicine. Every time you offer stillness, you confront your own storm. Every time you hold space for another's vulnerability, you meet the wounds you once denied. Every time you choose consciousness over control, you become a little more real. That is shadow work. To see in another what you have hidden within yourself and love it into awareness. It is not romantic. It is not easy, but it is sacred. Because when you reach this point, the place beyond possession, beyond fear, beyond the need to win, you discover the truth Jung devoted his life to. That love is not something you find. Love is something that awakens when the self meets another self, and both recognize God in between. So do not try to be unforgettable. Be undistorted. Be the man whose silence teaches, whose steadiness heals, whose absence speaks in truth, and whose presence brings peace to the room. Because attraction fades, devotion transforms, but presence rewrites the soul. And when your presence becomes her mirror, when your energy awakens rather than consumes, you have stepped beyond the game of love into the art of consciousness itself. You are no longer chasing her affection. You are walking her and yourself home. For only in the meeting of shadow and light, Jung wrote, does the self become whole. That is the final secret. She never clung to you. She clung to the part of herself that you reminded her was still alive, and that is the quiet power of a man who has mastered the alchemy of presence.